you go to number 2 in the charts with your first record, and obviously from then on it's downwards for a while, but I was very...
Líbí se mi to, protože vím jednu věc jistě. Pokud se už oženíte, musíte se k tomu zavázat. Cliff Richard miloval jednu ženu 50 let. Ona si místo toho vzala jeho nejlepšího přítele, pak si vzala někoho jiného a nakonec mu zemřela v náručí. Nikdy se s nikým neoženil, nikdy neměl děti, jen zpíval a přitom skrýval největší zlomené srdce v historii britské hudby. Když policie v roce 2014 provedla razii v jeho domě, nebyla první, kdo ho zničil. BBC už uzavřela tajnou dohodu. Obvinění byla lži, ale škoda byla skutečná. Žubl dostal pásový opar, nemohl spát. Říkal, že se mu zdál jeho vlastní dům znečištěný. Muž, který kdysi plnil stadion Wembley, se nyní bál opustit svůj dům. 14. října 1940 v nemocnici krále Jiřího v Lucknow v britské Indii přišel Harry Roger Webb do světa, který se již třásl pod tíhou války a revoluce. Zuřila druhá světová válka. Protesty za nezávislost Indiánů vřely. V roce 1946 vypukly během dne přímé akce nepokoje a britské rodiny začaly kolonii opouštět. Mezi nimi byli i Webbovi. Harryho otec pracoval v koloniálním systému, ale v roce 1948 bylo jasné, že se říše hroutí. Proto odjeli, ne autem ani letadlem, ale pomalou, přeplněnou lodí, která křižovala Indický oceán. SS Ranchi byla jejich záchranným člunem. Po 3 dlouhé týdny vezla stovky britských rodin, které všechny opustili jediný domov, který znali, od služebnictva a slunečního svitu se dostali k přídělovému systému a šedé obloze. Anglie byla chladná a stále se zotavovala z války. Webbovi se nakonec usadili v malém domě v Carshaltonu v Surrey. Pryč byly velké pokoje a teplé večery. Pro chlapce, který kdysi žil v pohodlí, to byl těžký začátek, ale zocelilo ho to. Tato cesta v něm něco zasadila, potřebu dokázat se, udělat z tohoto podivného nového života něco většího. A brzy Harry Webb zmizel. Muž jménem Harry Greytax ho pozorně sledoval. Řídil talenty a měl cit pro trendy. Řekl Harry mu, že potřebuješ jméno, které zní jako rock. Cliff navrhl silný, britský, pevný, jako útes. Pak přišel Richard, pochstal Little Richardovi, divoké americké rockové hvězdě. Harry Webb byl pryč. Narodil se Cliff Richard. Nejenže si změnil jméno, ale změnil i britskou hudbu. 29. srpna 1958 vyšla píseň s názvem Move It. Znělo to syrově, hlasitě a rebelsky. Vůbec se to nepodobalo čistému a zdvořilému popu té doby. Cliffovi bylo teprve 18. Píseň se dostala na 2. místo v britských hitparádách a spustila vlnu šoku. Poprvé měli britští teenageři svou vlastní rockovou hvězdu. Nekopíroval Ameriku. Tvořil něco nového. Ta jedna píseň otevřela dveře všem, kteří ho následovali. Beatles, Stones a dalším. Ale nebyla to jen hudba, byla to mánie. Když Cliff téhož roku jel na turné, Británie se zbláznila. Dívky křičely, plakali a omdlévali. Kluci ho nenáviděli za to, že kradl pozornost. Ochranka nedokázala davy udržet. Byl to chaos na úrovni Elvise. But this was in London, Manchester, and Leeds. It had never happened here before. They called it Cliff hysteria. The newspapers loved it, so did the record labels. In 1959, the madness doubled. Cliff released Living Doll. He didn't even want to. He thought the song was too soft, too fake. I hated it, he told his producer, but the band changed it to a slow, country-style ballad. It hit #1 and stayed there for 6 weeks, selling 770,000 copies. He got a silver disc in November. By January, he had a gold, then came Travel in Light, another #1. 5 more weeks on top. Between the two, Cliff sold over 1 million records. No one else in Britain had done that before. Hollywood came calling. In 1959, Cliff appeared in a dark, dramatic film called Serious Charge. It wasn't lighthearted. It dealt with homosexuality, false accusations, and heavy moral questions. Cliff was only devout act, and it shocked everyone that he signed on. A year later, he starred in Espresso Bongo, a satirical film that poked fun at the music industry. With these roles, Cliff made it clear he wasn't just a teen idol. He wanted to act, to grow, to be more than a singer. British pop stars had never done that before. Then came Summer Holiday. On January 10, 1963, the film premiered in London. 3,000 fans flooded Leicester Square. Cliff couldn't even get out of his car. That night, he missed his own premiere, but it didn't matter. The soundtrack hit #1 on the UK albums chart before the film even hit theaters nationwide. It stayed there for 8 straight weeks. Multiple songs from the film reached #1 the next time. Bachelor Boy, Summer Holiday, even The Shadows' instrumental, Foot Tapper, topped the charts. The movie was the second biggest British box office hit of jednu tisíc 963, just behind From Russia with Love. And in that same year, Cliff was voted the most popular film star in the UK. But then came the Beatles. Most assumed Cliff would be swept aside. Yet in jednu tisíc 964, right in the heart of Beatlemania, Cliff released 6 top 10 hits. The Beatles only managed 5. His songs, like Constantly, On the Beach, and I Could Easily Fall, In Love with You, kept him in the spotlight. Even when the Beatles were revolutionizing music and storming America, Cliff was holding his ground at home. The battle was real. His movie, Summer Holiday, and the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night, clashed at cinemas across the country. Both broke records, but British audiences hadn't forgotten who had come first. Even Paul McCartney admitted it. He once said that the Beatles left for Hamburg because Cliff had everything sewn up in Britain, and John Lennon said it plainly. Before Cliff Richard and Move It, there was nothing worth listening to in England. In jednu tisíc 965, something truly unexpected happened. New Musical Express held a global readers' poll. Fans were asked to pick the world's top male singer. Cliff beat Elvis. He beat Lennon. He beat McCartney. That year, the Beatles released Help and Rubber Soul. Elvis was still selling out everywhere, but Cliff won. Why? Because even with the world changing around him, Cliff kept evolving. He didn't try to be the Beatles. He didn't chase trends. He balanced pop ballads, faith-friendly films, and genuine charm. He was consistent, and for fans around the world, that mattered. He was their rock before the British invasion and long after it. In June jednu tisíc 966, something happened that no one in the music world saw coming. At Earl's Court, Cliff Richard walked out onto the stage, not to sing, but to stand beside American evangelist Billy Graham and tell thousands of people that he had become a Christian. This wasn't just a quiet personal decision. It was a bold public testimony broadcast across the country. Fans who knew him as a British version of Elvis or Little Richard were left stunned. Some cried, others just stood in disbelief. The man they loved for his rebellious energy had taken a turn they never expected. But this moment wasn't random. It was the end of a spiritual journey that had started 2 years earlier. Still, doing it in front of Billy Graham's massive audience, right in the middle of the swinging Padesát SE, gave it a level of seriousness no one could ignore. Rock stars in that era weren't supposed to talk about God. They were meant to rebel, push limits, and break rules. Cliff's announcement went against everything the culture thought a pop icon should be. Almost immediately, people panicked. Some fans thought it was the end of his music career. Industry insiders whispered that he might quit and become a teacher. That idea wasn't far off. Cliff himself considered leaving the stage behind for good. He thought maybe he couldn't be a proper Christian and stay in the spotlight. Music magazines began speculating who would take his place. Booking agents backed off. The industry believed that you couldn't be both spiritual and a star. And for a while, Cliff wasn't sure either. But then, something changed. Cliff didn't disappear. He stayed, and by doing so, he created something brand new. He didn't drop his fate, and he didn't quit music. Instead, he found a way to combine the two. He became the first major UK pop star to openly live his faith while staying in the charts. Nobody had done that before. Not like this. He proved you didn't have to pick one life over the other. You could be honest about your beliefs and still fill concert halls. This choice wasn't just career survival. It changed who he was. Cliff later admitted that his rock and roll image had been fake. He wasn't confident. He was just pretending. But after becoming a Christian, that changed. He said, "My confidence grew. My attitude changed. It wasn't important to be right all the time. The pressure to play a role disappeared. He felt free to be real. That new confidence helped him perform better, even as the Beatles and Mersey beat acts dominated the charts. While others tried to keep up, Cliff grew stronger because he finally felt like himself. But by the mid-70s, Cliff's career hit a low. In jednu tisíc 975, for the first time, he didn't have a single song in the charts. People were starting to think his time was over. Then came Devil Woman, released in April, jednu tisíc 976. The song was loud, edgy, and darker than anything he'd done before. It told a strange story about a psychic, a curse, and a stray cat. But more importantly, it rocked. It hit number 9 in the UK and number 6 in the USA, his first top 10 in America. It sold over 2 million copies. Cliff was back. Even more shocking, the hard rock crowd embraced him. Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and Elton John were spotted wearing I'm Nearly Famous badges supporting his comeback album. These were guitar legends showing public respect for a man who'd once been seen as clean-cut and outdated. One music critic even compared Cliff's new album to Marvin Gaye's best work. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a full transformation. The kid from the Padesát was now being hailed as a serious rock artist. He didn't stop there. In jednu tisíc 987, Over 25 years into his career, Cliff released Always Guaranteed, a modern pop album that avoided the cheesy synths of the decade and sounded timeless. Inspired by Thriller, he teamed up again with Alan Tarney. The result? A platinum-selling record. It reached number 5 in the UK, stayed there for 24 weeks, and sold over 3 million copies. 4 singles from the album broke into the UK top 40. Some people even went silver, selling 250,000 copies. Cliff proved that even in the late 80s, he could compete with the best. Then came Christmas 1988. Cliff released Mistletoe and Wine, a gentle, faith-filled holiday song. He recorded it with tinsel hanging over the mic in the middle of summer. The single debuted at number 7, shot to number 1 the next week, and stayed there for 4 straight weeks. It sold Padesát copies in 6 weeks and became the year's biggest UK single, outperforming U2, Kylie Minogue, and Phil Collins. By 2024, it had gone platinum and was still earning 100 tisíc a year in royalties. Even decades later, people couldn't get enough of it. But one of the most impressive moments came in May 1989. Cliff released his 100th single. No other British artist had ever done that. To mark the occasion, he invited 9000 fans to the London Palladium. He played them 6 unreleased tracks and asked them to vote. The song that came in second, The Best of Me, was the one he chose. It peaked at number 2 in the UK and earned silver certification. It also charted internationally, number 2 in Ireland, 25 in New Zealand, and Padesát in Australia. It wasn't just about hitting Stowe, it was about staying relevant while the industry changed again and again. Cliff Richard's concert at Wembley Stadium in June 1989 wasn't just another show. It was a full-blown spectacle. They called it The Event, and it lived up to that name. Wembley was packed. Thousands poured in to witness something more than music. It was a time machine. The first half of the concert brought back the Padesát SE, with Cliff paying tribute to the TV show Oh Boy, the same show that launched his career in Padesát. Cliff didn't perform alone. He brought on the Vernon's Girls, the Dallas Boys, the Kalin Twins, acts that once ruled British rock and roll. For the fans in the crowd, it felt like stepping into a living jukebox. Then the second half kicked in. That's when Cliff showed why he wasn't just a nostalgia act. He performed his more recent hits with a confidence that could only come from someone who had conquered the charts for decades. Cameras were rolling. The concert was professionally filmed and later released as a live album and TV special. This wasn't just a gig. It was a carefully crafted historic moment. That same year, 1989, Cliff received the biggest honor the Bright Awards could give, the Outstanding Contribution to Music. But it wasn't just about a trophy. It marked something bigger. He had become the only singer in history to land number 1 hits in 5 straight decades. The Padesát SE, 60, 70, 80, and now the 90. He had already released Stowe singles by then. The Best of Me was the 100th and it hit the charts like a bullet. At that point, Cliff had 65 top 10 hits and 14 number 1s. No one else came close. A year later, on June 30, 1990, another huge moment came. Nebworth Park, a massive charity concert to support the Nordhoff Robbins Music Therapy charity. Cliff performed with the Shadows, but they were just one part of a legendary lineup. Paul McCartney, Elton John, Pink Floyd, Eric Clapton, Genesis, and Phil Collins all took the stage. Rain poured when Tears for Fears opened, but the crowd stayed. Soaked and singing, Cliff stood beside rock's biggest names and proved once again, he belonged. Then came December 1990. A new song hit the airwaves, Savior's Day. It was written in October 1989 by Chris Eaton, who pitched it to Cliff at a Christmas party in a Rolls-Royce. Cliff listened to the demo right there in the car and said, "This is a number 1. He was right. It entered the charts at number 6 on December 8, then climbed to number 3, then number 2. On December 23, it hit number 1, knocking Ice Ice Baby off the top. The video, shot at Durdle Door in Swanage in sunny September, showed people in full winter gear, sweating while pretending it was Christmas. But the result was magical. The momentum didn't stop. Around that time, Cliff released Private Collection, 1989, a greatest hits album. It sold over 2 million copies, multi-platinum. It became the biggest album of his career. Songs like We Don't Talk Anymore, which sold nearly 5 million copies worldwide, kept his name echoing through every radio in Britain. This wasn't just nostalgia. He was outselling new pop stars. He was leading the charge in a fast-changing industry. But then, things took a strange turn. In 1999, Cliff released The Millennium Prayer. Mainstream radio didn't like it. BBC Radio Diva refused to playlist it. They said it didn't have broad appeal. But they were still playing Tina Turner and Cher. Both Cliff's age, Radio Jedin had already dropped older acts like the Beatles. Virgin Radio's Chris Evans once said Cliff was too old. DJs had to get special permission to play the song. Fans were furious. Cliff's fan club even protested outside the BBC. It felt like the industry had turned its back on him. But then came the miracle. Without a major label, without airplay, without the machine behind him. The Millennium Prayer went to #1. Not for 1 week, 3. From November 28 to December 1999. 1999. It was his Sternax the UK #1, and it came 40 years after his first. Fans bought multiple copies. Churches supported it. It wasn't just a hit, it was a protest. Cliff had beaten the system. And it didn't just work in the UK. In Australia and New Zealand, the song reached #2. In Europe, it cracked the top Zavázat in several countries. 3 nations gave it platinum status. No major radio play, no heavy promotion. Just people who believed in the song. It raised serious money for the Children's Promise charity. Cliff had proved you could have faith, raise funds, and still top the charts. Away from the music, Cliff's personal life had its own storylines, some of them heartbreaking. In 1971, on his TV show It's Cliff Richard, he invited a young Australian singer named Olivia Newton-John to perform. She was Zavázat Diva. The chemistry between them was instant. Cliff later said, "I knew right away she was a for-life." He wasn't wrong. They stayed close for more than Padesát years. But what the world didn't know until Cliff's 2020 autobiography was that he had fallen in love with her. He wrote, "When I and many of us were in love with Olivia, she was engaged to someone else. I lost my chance." Cliff never married. And it seemed Olivia had left a mark that never faded. He added that everyone who knew her eventually fell for her. What made this story even more tangled was who she was engaged to. Bruce Welch, Cliff's own bandmate from the Shadows. Olivia met Bruce in jednu 1968 when she was the opening act. Their relationship was explosive from the start. Bruce was still married. Their affair made headlines. They were engaged for 5 years, but never made it to the altar. Olivia po celou dobu úzce spolupracovala s Cliffem. Jezdila s ním na turné a zpívala po jeho boku. Když Bruce v roce 1973 konečně opustila, upadl do depresí a dokonce si ublížil. Kolovaly zvěsti. Zamilovala se snad místo toho do Cliffa? Nikdo to nikdy nahlas neřekl, ale ticho bylo ohlušující. Navzdory emocionální bouři Cliff a Olivia spolu dál vystupovali. Více než 40 let zpívali duety, na které si fanoušci dodnes vzpomínají. Jejich hit z roku 1980, Suddenly from Xanadu, byl jen jedním z mnoha. V živých vystoupeních také hráli When I'm 64 a další klasiky. Jejich hlasy se prolínaly tak přirozeně, že Cliff často říkal, že Olivia má jakýsi půvab, kterému se nikdo jiný nevyrovná. Jejich poslední duet se odehrál v říjnu 2015 během Cliffova koncertu k 75. narozeninám v Royal Albert Hall. Naposledy si zaspívali Suddenly, když Cliff v roce 2023 vydal své album Cliff with Strings, My Kinda Life. Použil tuto živou nahrávku jako poctu Olivii. Pak přišla ta nejtěžší část. 3 týdny předtím, než Olivia zemřela, jí Cliff zavolal. Byla optimistická, vřelá a veselá jako vždy. Dobrý den, Cliff. Jak se máš? Drahoušku? Zeptala si. Nezněla jako někdo, kdo má brzy umřít. Cliff později napsal, nikdy by mě ani na okamžik z toho telefonátu nenapadlo, že tohle napíšu. Olivia bojovala s rakovinou prsu 30 let. Byla to bojovnice, ale nikdy nedala najevo svou bolest. Když 8. srpna 2022 zemřela. Cliff byl zdrcený. Neznáším to slovo, řekl s odkazem na smrt. Místo toho řekl, že prostě přestala žít. Byl to jeho způsob, jak se vyrovnat s tichem, které po sobě zanechala. 14. srpna 2014. Cliff Richard odpočíval ve svém domě v Portugalsku, když zapnul televizi. 2. Co uviděl, mu zastavilo srdce. V živém přenosu kroužily nad jeho domem v Berkshire vrtulníky a policisté prohledávali jeho osobní věci. Jeho první myšlenka byla jednoduchá, ale děsivá. Vypadali jako lupiči, ale tohle nebyla loupež. Jednalo se o rozsáhlou policejní razii, kterou díky tajné dohodě mezi BBC a policií v South Yorkshire vysílaly televize po celém světě. BBC byla předem informována. Dokonce to interně označili za nájemný zásah. Chtěli drama, dostali ho a Cliff Richard byl zničen. V té době mu bylo 77 let. Byl to národní ikona s čistou historií a desítkami let služby v hudebním světě. Teď klečel v kuchyni a vzlikal. Záběry byly všude, od Velké Británie po Austrálii. Během své soudní výpovědi Cliff plakal, když četl seznam zemí, které odvysílaly záběry jeho soukromého života jak se trhá na kusy. Později uvedl, že stres v něm vyvolal pocit, jako by měl dostat infarkt nebo mrtvici. Všechno to začalo jedním obviněním. Muž po 40 tvrdil, že ho v roce 1985 Cliff napadl během shromáždění Billyho Grahama na stadionu Bromall Lane. Ta demonstrace nebyla malá událost. Během 5 večerů se jí zúčastnilo 200 lidí. Cliff vystoupil na pódium s Grahamem a podpořil křesťanskou věc, kterou Graham prosazoval od roku 1966. But the accusation fell apart fast. The man described a room with sports equipment where the alleged assault happened. The problem? That room didn't even exist in jednu 1985. And the sports gear? Stored somewhere else entirely. Still, the police spent devastate 2 months chasing this. They ignored statements from their own officers who were assigned to guard Cliff that night. Officers who were by his side the entire time. And they weren't even interviewed. The entire investigation dragged on for nearly 2 years, cost taxpayers OSM set tisik, and led to 0 charges. Nothing, not one, but the damage was already done. As if the live raid and endless headlines weren't enough, the BBC then submitted their coverage for Scoop of the Year. Yes, while Cliff was still under investigation, the broadcaster entered the raid footage into an award competition. That decision alone earned the BBC an extra devastate tisik in aggravated damages later. The court called it arrogant and humiliating. Behind the scenes, the human toll kept rising. Cliff later revealed he slipped into depression. Some days he couldn't sleep. Other days he couldn't even raise his arms. He developed shingles. He lost weight. He fell down from exhaustion. He said he felt like his house had been contaminated. He stopped feeling safe in his home. Even basic things like releasing an album or promoting his book became impossible. Everything stopped. Because the world saw him not as a man, but as a headline. And then came one of the strangest moments of all. Right after the raid aired, a man tried to blackmail Cliff. He demanded money and threatened to spread lies unless he was paid off. That man was arrested. But bizarrely, his original sex abuse claim was still taken seriously in the investigation. So here we had someone who tried to extort Cliff using the raid, and he was still treated as a credible victim. Eventually, Cliff received 4 statistics in damages from South Yorkshire police, who admitted that what they did, tipping off the BBC, was unlawful. They apologized publicly, but apologies don't erase trauma, nor do legal payouts, even when they reach into the millions. And they did. By the end of it all, the BBC had spent nearly $20 million in legal costs, on top of the damages paid to Cliff. Still, Cliff wasn't satisfied with the way prosecutors worded their decision. The CPS said there was insufficient evidence to bring charges. But to Cliff, that wasn't enough. He wanted it on record. There was no evidence, not a shred. The suggestion that something might still be there, that cloud of suspicion, was what haunted him most. He said, "I feel I've been smeared, not by the police, but by the BBC." In court, he broke down again, as he described that fear of being forever tainted. Even though he was cleared, even though he had done nothing wrong, he told MPs that being named publicly had ruined how he looked people in the eye. That no matter what, the damage had been done. People would always wonder. He had every reason to think that. His name had been plastered across front pages. His face was shown while police removed evidence that turned out to mean nothing. His life's work had been reduced to one raid, one rumor, and a media circus. In July 2018, he won his case against the BBC. The judge ruled that Cliff had a reasonable expectation of privacy, and that the BBC had violated it in a serious, sensationalist way. That ruling changed how British media could report police investigations from then on. But for Cliff, it was never about just winning. It was about survival, about telling the world that what happened to him wasn't just unfair. It was inhumane. He never got the 2 years of his life back. He never got to erase the headlines, or the stares, or the feeling that his name, no matter how clean, would always carry a shadow.